Hello everyone, welcome to OCCFO Technologies. Today I'm going to show you how to build the Laminas Framework album module using Doctrine ORM for our database interactions. If you haven't started your XAMPP yet, you can start it. I'd like to run mine in administrator mode. So we are going to use the Laminas Framework album tutorial. Okay, so the following tutorials will guide you through creating your first Laminas MVC application, testing it and adding features to it. The in-depth tutorial dives into some more advanced details of how the MVC works, along with strategies for developing models and achieving separation of concerns. Okay, so let's get started. Now, this tutorial is intended to give an introduction to using Laminas by creating a simple database-driven application using the model view controller paradigm. By the end of by the end, you will have a working Laminas application that you can poke around the code to find out more about how it all works. So the application that we are going to build is a simple inventory system to display which albums we own. The main page will list our collection and allow us to add, edit, and delete CDs. We are going to need 4 pages in our website. So and that means you'll be needing the list of albums, add new album, edit album, and the delete album pages. And then for our database, we need the ID, artist, and title fields. Okay, let's continue. Now, getting started with a skeleton application, we are going to create a new project. If you are on a Laminas or Unix environment, you can use Composer to get the skeleton application. But I'm on the Windows application Windows environment, so I will head on to the GitHub where I can easily download the source code, the skeleton, the skeleton's code, and then I will open and copy it to the XAMPP folder. XAMPP htdocs, then I'll paste it here. So once I paste it, I'll rename it to Laminas album. Enter. Now let's go ahead and download composer.far file into this project. Download composer. So these are the commands we'll be using to download composer into our project. For that, you use the XAMPP control panel shell. Let me do it like this. I'll copy the first line. Before that, I'll have to navigate to my project. This htdocs Laminas album. So cd htdocs Laminas album. Now paste the first line, copy, paste, copy, paste. You wait for it to finish downloading. Voila, this is the file. And paste the last line. Okay, so we should have the file here. Now I'm going to update composer using php composer dot the file we downloaded. Update. Okay, so do you want a minimal install? No. Do you like to install developer toolbar? No. Database support? No, because you'll be using Doctrine. Forms? Yes. Yes. Login? No. Command interface? No. Yes. 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 No. Ah, problem. Root composer JSON requires Laminas. Okay, let's go ahead and then install our Doctrine ORM. Or first, let me try this with install to see if this problem can go off. No, no. I don't know why I'm getting this problem, but I'm going to figure it out. For now, let me install my Doctrine using PHP composer dot far require Doctrine ORM Doctrine ORM module. Then I would add with all dependencies to download only the dependent components. So one is a default, so I'll just enter yes. Remember this option, yes is a default, I'll just enter. Make your selection, one is a default, so I'll just enter. Remember this option for packages of the same type, yes, enter. Okay, so now do you want a minimal install? It has brought us back to the same options. No. Developer? No. Database? No. Forms? Yes. Yes. No. No. Yes. 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 No. Okay, so now everything is installed without any problem. But this configure config file, config cache file database not found. Okay, so to avoid seeing this error, let me just create this file, model. So data cache, new file. Okay. So now that we have Laminas installed, there are some few things we need to configure to be able to keep it running. Let's go to XAMPP Apache conf Ezra. And then we are searching for vhost. Let me open with Visual Studio. So I'll just copy this code, or you can also find this code in the GitHub where we downloaded the Laminar skeleton. You can find the setup for the Apache setup here. So you can easily copy this or simply click on this to copy. So you remember our path is talking about this path where we have yes, this path. So I just copy this one and then come and paste it here. And do the same to this. Now I'll change the name to okay, let me use Laminas album dot local. It can be any name. Then I will save. Then I will go to Windows. Windows on the drive C. Then search for System32. I'm going to look for host System32 drivers etc host. Let me open with my Visual Studio. Yes. So I will just put this line there and then make sure you have this one too. If it is uncommented, you comment it out. Then I will save. Okay, failed. Yeah, you need to actually be an administrator to be able to save this. So let me try. We try as admin. Yeah, nice, saved. Me saved. So once that is done, we will go back to our XAMPP for XAMPP panel, control panel. Stop Apache and then start it again because of the configuration we did for the Apache. Now let us test. Laminas project. Laminas album dot local. And there should be a problem in our configuration. Let's go and check whatever we did wrong. So, okay. So we were supposed to add public to this line. Save. Now we are adding public because want we want to find this file. We want the page to always find this index.php file. Okay, so now that we've saved, we need to stop and start again. Now let's refresh. I guess we've made another mistake. Ah, this is supposed to be forward slash forward. I guess. Save again. We have filter error and cut type. Okay, let me try and update our composer again. Install. Okay, so our Laminas is installed. Now we can close this and this, and then we would open folder with our Laminas album project. Yes. Okay, add folder to workspace or album. Add yes, I trust. Okay, so we have our public folder here where we have the CSS, IMG, and images, and then the JavaScript. Then we have our model with only the application model now. So going back to the Laminas tutorial, we are done with all this. So we are going to, okay, they're asking us to test to see the following page, star 1234. Okay, so /1234. Once we have this, then it means that the routing is working. Now we have to make sure we are in the development mode, and we are going to use composer, php composer.file development enable. So we are now in the development mode. So you can check the status of your development by using development status. So development mode is enabled. If you want to go back, if you want to disable it, you just use development disable. Okay, so now we move on to the models section. Now we are going to set up the album model. We start by creating the directory called album under the model with the following subdirectories to hold the models. That is the album. Then we have the config src controller form model, view album. Okay. Then we will create the model.php file under the src, and then in our composer.json we add the album model to it. Then we are going to use dump autoload to save the changes. Then we'll create a file called model.config.php under the model album config with this code. So that will be where we define our routing. Then we are going to add the album to the config models.config file. Then when we are done, we can then move on to the next routing and controllers. So let's get on. First, we create our album model. Then we have src, we have config, we have min view. So under the config we have the model dot we have the model dot config dot php. Under the src, we have the model dot php. Then we have controller. We have the forms. I will be using the service. Then I will, this will be for our doctrine entity. Then the repository. Okay, so yeah, so with the model.php, I'll copy this file. This code. Always remember to bring your PHP tab and then save. Now, okay, so I'll copy this line and then go to the composer.json and search for the autoload PSR4. And then make sure you have this line here. Always remember the comma before bringing the line. Save it. Now we will go into the Laminas album model, Laminas album, our root directory, and then go to config models and then add our album model. Save it and then close it. Once we are done, we are going to dump autoload php composer dot far dump autoload to save our setup. Okay, done. So now let's copy this code to our config model config. Then save. Okay. I guess we are done for this page, so we'll move on to routing and controllers. In the routing and controllers, it is important to understand how the framework expects the pages to be organized. Each page of the application is known as an action, and actions are grouped into controllers within models. Hence, you would generally group related actions into a controller. For instance, a news controller might have actions of current, archived, and view. As we have 4 pages that all apply to albums, we will group them in a single controller. There is an album controller within our album module. So these actions will be the index, add, edit, and delete actions. The mapping of a URL to a particular action is done using the routes that are defined in the modules. In the modules module.config.php file, you add the route for album actions. That means you have to update the current config file we have with the following section. So I'm going to copy this section, the router section, copy, and then I'll head on to the config, album config module. So I'll paste it here. So let me save it. What this is doing is that when we go to our browser and then type /album, so this album will look for the index page as the default page. Now anything we type after should be an action. Let me show you here. So when we go to our site and we type album, this album should use the index action or the album controller. So yeah, let's continue. We are going to create the controller now. Let me copy. When you get there, you can read. Take your time to read the tutorial yourself. So let me create the controller in the controller directory. With this code. Okay, so our controller is now set up. We have now set up the 4 actions that we want to use. They won't work yet until we set up the views. The URLs of each actions are okay. So this is the port 8080. I'm using port 80, so when on the site I don't have to bring port 8080 or even 80. So let us now initialize the view scripts by creating these files. You know the controller name is album controller, so we are going to create this in the view folder, album controller. So this will be the album model and the album controller. And the view scripts will be index.phtml, add.phtml, and then .html. So this will be edit album, add album, and then index. Okay, so let's now test what we've done so far. Okay, a plugin by name our segment was in front. So if you look at when we were creating or updating the router, we needed to add this line segment, that is use Laminas router HTTP segment. Add it here. Now refresh. Okay, so here if you want to add use album, if you want to navigate to add, you cannot do this. It will tell you page not found. So like in the router, every action will have to follow this album, right? So that means if you want to navigate to the album page in the add in the album controller page, you need to navigate like this. Add. The same thing applies to edit and delete. Okay, so now we will move to the next session. That is the database and models. So now that we have the album set up with the controller, action methods, and view scripts, it is time to look at the model section of our application. Remember that the model is part of that deals with the application's core purpose, the so-called business rules, and in our case, deals with the database. We will make use of Laminas. Okay, so this is where I will deviate from to use the Doctrine ORM. So instead of using the Laminas DB, I would rather use the Doctrine ORM for the database interaction. I'm going to create the album database. Let me copy this and then move on to localhost. Local PHP admin. I'm in my PHP admin now, so I'll create a new database called Laminas tutorial DB. Okay, great. So I will create a table now using the auto increment. This should be like this. Then I will save it. Okay, so we now have our database ready. So what I will do next will be to register this database in the config autoload local. Okay, so I need to activate this file by renaming it to from local.php.dist to local.php. So I will use doctrine should be like this. Then connection I'll use the ORM default. Should be then this should be a driver class. The name will be Laminas tutorial DB. Okay, save it. So now that we have our doctrine and then the DB, the database registered, we can go on and create our entity. Okay. That is a model fast. Since this tutorial is based on Laminas DB, we aren't using the Laminas DB. So from here, everything we will do will be based on doctrine. At the end, we have to arrive at the listing page here. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our entity. You create a file called album.php. And remember that our table has ID, artist, and let me check. Okay, and title. So we have to make sure we have the ID, artist, and title. Oops. Okay, let's get onto it. First, let's call our namespace album entity. Then we are going to use Doctrine ORM mapping as ORM. At ORM entity. At ORM entity repository class album repository album repository. Then we will define our table at ORM table name will be album. Class album. Okay, so know that we are calling a file here album repository, so we have to create this file before we get an error. This should be in the repository file. This file will be responsible for getting all data from the database. Okay, that's all we need to do for now with this file. Let's go back to our album and define our properties. So the first one will be the ID. The column name will be ID. And we want this to be auto-generated. So we'll do this for the artist property. And the title. ID, this will be for artist. And this will be for title. Now we need to define our getters and setters here. So we will return an integer here. This will be for string. Okay, so our album entity is ready. Now we have our get ID, get artist, get title. Then we have our set ID, set artist. This should be string. So set title. Save it. Now that we have our entity ready, let's go ahead to the album config module config.php file and register our entities in this entity folder for every entity in this folder to be recognized. So with that, you register it here under after the view manager. Wait. Then save it. Now let's go back to our album controller, update the index page to fetch all data from the database. With this, you will need the entity manager, and so you have to create a factory that can instantiate the controller. Let's create a folder for the factory. This should be album controller factory. Now let's go back to our album controller. So what we've done now is to inject the entity manager to the controller, and then use this entity manager with the get repository to find all or get all the data from the album class. Then pass these albums to the view template. There's supposed to be color here. Okay, let me save it. Now we now have to go to the model config file to make sure that our controller is using the factory instead of the invocable factory. Save. Okay, now let's go to our browser to check if there are no errors. Pass errors, unexpected. Okay, I think I made a mistake here. Yes, this has to be a comma. Save. An error occurred. Message unable to resolve service. Album controller to a factory. Are you certain you provided it during configuration? Yes. This can only mean that we may have misspelled because the let me close this one. Okay. So this can only mean the album controller is not able to find the it's not able to find its factory. So there should be controller, album controller. Okay, there is a typo here. It should be a controller. Factory album controller factory class. Save it. Fatal error class album controller factory contains one abstract method and must therefore be declared abstract or implement. Let me see on line 8 album controller factory. Okay, let me see line 8. So this is correct. Then it means let me check. Interrupt. Okay, the mistake is from here. There should be a factory here. Save. Another error. Entity manager. Sure it is. This is supposed to be small m, not capital M. Save it. Ah, another error. Connection problem. So Doctrine ORM module option is DBAL connection set params. This should be from the config local.php params. I think the error is from here. This is supposed to be params is supposed to be here. Should be like this. Then This should be it should be the host. Yes. Okay. Save. Now we have another error. This time, the service with name doctrine.driver.orm default could not be created. Reason: options with name album driver could not be found in doctrine.driver. There is no problem in the album controller factory. There is no problem here either in the album controller. There should be a typo somewhere. Maybe doctrine driver. Okay, there is a typo here. Save. Well, as a programmer, you must know that errors are inevitable, and knowing how to solve them quickly than being irritated will make you a very good programmer. Okay, so now if the error has moved to album.php, in our entity ID, so the problem is from here. Function is spelled wrongly. The brain is faster than the hand. Just save. Entity repository not found. On the repository. That is on line 7. Okay, another typo. This is supposed to be doctrine. Okay, no more errors. Let's now go to our tutorial where we have to list the albums from the database to the views. that will be at okay, um, here. So we'll copy this to the index file. Index, album index, and paste and save. Refresh. An error again. Okay, and this time cannot access private property album entity album title. Now we are getting this error because of how we have defined our getters in the album entity. So instead of getting the albums for each album directly like this, we will have to use the getter method from here. So title will be copy this, paste. So this is how it's supposed to be get title bracket close. You do the same thing for the artist. Get artist. Then yes, you have to do the same thing for the ID as well. And that will be get ID, get ID. Save. Okay. Now we have all the data from the database showing in the index view. What next? Let's see. We can now move on to the forms and actions. So for us to be able to add a new form, you need for us to be able to add a new album, you need a form. And this form will be called album form, which will be in the album folder. Let's go ahead and create our form. So I'll copy from this section because I'm not going to use the same format. Okay, so we've completed our forms with the input filter. We only added a title in the artist with the submit element. We are not adding any ID to the form like the tutorial did, because the ID is supposed to be automatically created in the database. So this is the input filter section. Strip tags, string cream. We may have to add this before it gives us an error. Which one again? String tags. String length. Yeah, I guess that'll be all. Save. Now we've called this form in the album controller here and then used it in the add action. We are checking whether the form is actually a post request. Well, if it is, then we fill in the data with the set data method. And then we check if the form is valid. That is where the input filter works. So we are supposed to create add the service. For this is the service section where the album can be saved to the database, but we haven't created a service in the service yet. So let's check for errors from the forms. If everything is okay, then we can go ahead and then create our service. Now save and then go to the browser, add new form. Okay, class album form not found. So this means there may be a typo somewhere. Album form, album form, forms. Okay, so as you can see, this is form, and we've used forms here instead of form. So I'll rename it to form. Filter error, allowed memory, album form line 56, line line 56. This is supposed to be get and not add. Save. Laminas filter, string length not found. Okay, this I think it's supposed to be validator. This is supposed to be validator instead of filter. Okay, so let's now go to our forms and action tutorial and then copy this section to our add PHTML render script, view script. Add. Now I realize there is a form hidden get ID here. We are not using any ID in our forms, so we delete this. Okay, we can now go and create our service files. That's the album service. Then we also create the factory. We need to create a factory in the factory folder. Now we are going to create the album service in this factory, and then we will register it in the model config. After registering it in the model config file, we will add it to our album controller factory, instantiate it there, and then call it in the album controller, and then use it here in the add action. So what I'm going to do is to create the service for the add new album, edit new album, and then delete an album. For add, edit, and delete album operations. Okay, so let's get on. Let me copy the controller factory and use it in the album service factory. All I have to do is to change this to service. Fat all the controllers to service. Now for the service file, I have to create it from scratch. Okay, so we are now done with our album action, the add action. Yeah. So we will go ahead to our browser to refresh syntax error 15, album service 15. That will be at, okay, yeah, and save. Okay, no errors. So we will test with some test title, test artist. Yeah, we can now add new album. As you can see, the test title, test artist data here. So what we did basically was we, from the album service here, we created new album entity here and then setting the data. So this data is from the forms. From the form here, the name, the title, and the artist. So we get the title from the data. Then we set the artist using the set artist method here. The same applies to the set title. The ID is normally automatic, so no need setting the ID. So what next? We will create the actions for the editing and the delete actions. Okay. So now that we finished with the edit action and the delete action, let's save it and then go to our browser, refresh, and then see if everything is okay. Okay, we did not get any errors here. So let's go to the edit section. Okay, so we can now go back to our forms and action tutorial. Search for the okay, before that, let me update the add.html file view script with this. Add, and so we will search for the ID as usual. Okay, remember we do not have the ID element in our form. Go back to the add title test2 artist test2. Okay, so we can go to the tutorial, then copy the edit html file. Again, let's delete the form heading ID element, save, and then go back to edit, undefined variable ID on line 22. Line 22. Guess we have to remove this set attribute. Save, refresh. Okay, let me test. Yeah, now our edit action is also working. Let's try with the delete. Root with name album not found. Well, I guess we made a mistake in the delete session. So this is supposed to be small a album. Save. Another error. F404. Okay, I guess we are trying to delete we are trying to delete a data that is not available. So let me try and delete this one too. Okay, yeah. So now let me take you through the action. The action is what we've done so far. Now with the index action, this is not the best way to fetch the data from the database. You would normally fed the data from the database in the album repository here. But that will be another discussion in our new in the next tutorial that I'll be teaching. That is a blog tutorial using the same Laminas and then Doctrine ORM. So for now, we are fetching the data directly in the controller like this, and then returning it to the album, to the view model using the albums. Two albums like this. Now, when we go to the add action, we define our form from here. Then we check if the form is actually a post request. If the post from the form is a post request. With this, if get request is a post. Then if it is a request, if it is a post request, we save the params from post to data, to this data variable. After that, we fill in the form using the set data. Then we check if the form is valid, and that is where the filter works. Once the filter works, once the filter is valid, once the form is valid, then we check, we get the data from the form and save it back to the data variable. Once we have our data, we then save it or send it to the add new album in our album service. That is where the album service comes in, and then save the data to the database. Once the data is saved to the database, we redirect the user to the album page. Here we render the form to the user. When we come to the edit action, the same thing almost applies. We define the form from the album form, then get the album ID from params from the root. Once we validate the ID that it is not less than 0, we continue to getting that particular album ID using the find one by ID from the album class. And if the album is not null, we try to check the request that is coming in, whether it is post, like in the add action. Fill the form with the data, then check if the form is valid. If it is valid, we save the updated data using the album and then the data. Then we return then we redirect the edit page to the album page. This is where we fill in the data that is already in the database. So we bind it to the form. Okay. Now the same thing almost applies to the delete action, where we get the album ID from params. We validate the ID, get the ID, get the particular album from the database with the find one by ID. Once the album is not null, we send the album, that particular album, to the database, and then it gets deleted as we defined it in the album service. Once it is deleted, redirecting the user to the root, to the album page. Okay, let's go back to our Laminas tutorial and check what is left. Okay, ensuring that the home page displays a list of albums. Currently, the home page is not displaying the list of albums. This is because it is using the applications index to display application. Yeah, this one to display to render this. So right now, when I click on the home, this is what is displaying now on the main index page or landing page. We can change that by first importing the album controller to the application model config file. Then we will change this line to this. Save, refresh. Okay, so that will be all. Next, to the conclusion. This concludes our brief look at building a simple but fully functional Laminas MVC application. In this tutorial, we briefly touched quite a number of different parts of the framework. The most important part of applications built with Laminas MVC are the models, the building blocks of any Laminas MVC application. To ease the work with dependencies inside the applications, we use the service manager. To be able to map a request to controllers and their actions, we use routes. Data persistence was performed using Laminas. Okay, we used Doctrine ORM instead of Laminas DB to communicate with the relational database. Input data is filtered and validated with input filters, and together with Laminas form, they provide a strong bridge between the domain, model, and view layer. Laminas View is responsible for the view in the MVC stack together with the vast amount of view helpers. I'm not sure we tested the filter, the form filter. Let me go to the forms. Okay, album, SRC form, album form to the filter. So let me change this to maybe 5. And then minimum 5 as well. That means the minimum character should be 5. Let me refresh. 1 character. This is 4. 2 char. Okay, so this is working. Let me. Okay, so this is 5 characters because of the space. Let me delete one and try again. Okay, so that means the filters are all working. So that will be all. And see you on my next tutorial, which will be on block model. Let's see, Laminas block Okay, so see you. Bye bye.